Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter welcome you to yet another Gutter Top 10 sports video. And today we're going to be looking at the top 10 most tragic F1 deaths in history. The ranking may be a little bit off, but I mean, these 10 deaths really has shook the Formula One community and all that. There is a honorable mention, and that was in 1971 when Joe Siffert died in a fiery crash at Brands Hatch racetrack in England, because this was kind of a celebration race for Jackie Stewart winning his third, was it his third or second? Second or third F1 title. He was the F1 champ in 1971, and they did a celebration race, and Sifford just had the misfortune of crashing like that. So, yeah, that's just one of the most brutal of all time. All that. Okay, so here we go. Number 10 is Jules Bianchi, 2014. Now, Bianchi's death is low on this list because Bianchi, unlike the others, actually died later. They died after, like, died months after his crash. So the crash happened in Japan when Jules Bianchi was off the road, and then all of a sudden, a crane truck was trying to help another car out, and then all of a sudden Biache went off the track and slammed into it. So it took a while for Biache to die in 9 months. 9 months. He became the first F1 driver since number one on this list to die. 2 decades. That's pretty impressive. Because usually in F1 prior to 1994, it was not uncommon to have like just a few years gap between deaths, which is stupid. And it also helps with the whole thing with innovation and all that. Number 9 is Riccardo Paletti, 1982. So the Canadian Grand Prix was held just weeks after Gilles Villeneuve passed away. This was the first time that the Canadian Grand Prix in a while would be held without Gilles in it. In 1978, Gilles won the race. So I can't remember. I think this was the first year that Canada had the race in June. Of course, in 2026, it's going to be in May on the same weekend as the Indy 500, which pisses me off because I like watching both events. So anyway, there was a massive accident at the start of the Canadian Grand Prix in which Riccardo Paletti's car was stalled on the track, on the grid. Fortunately, though, other cars could get around it, but unfortunately, though, yeah, there was a story of Patrese slamming into Paletti's car. No, sorry, Patrese was the one who was stalled, and Paletti tried to avoid it and crashed right into it and basically died instantaneously. But yeah, that was just one hell of a accident, and that was actually the last F1 death till number 2 on this list. So it took 12 years for that to happen because usually it's like I said, every few years. Number 8 is Tom Price at the South African Grand Prix 1977. So what happened was that Price was in the race, and then there was an accident involving another driver, and then the track marshal was trying to get across the track and help out. Unfortunately, though, the track marshal got hit by another car, by Tom Price's car, and in the moment, the track marshal's fire extinguisher accidentally smacked Tom Price in the helmet, and Price died of head injuries and all that. So that was just unbelievable what happened. But yeah, Price wasn't the one who crashed. It was just the track marshal who collided with him because of the fire extinguisher. Number 7 is Wolfgang von Trips, 1961. This was a massive accident. I kind of left it outside the top 3 on purpose, despite all the deaths. Because at Monza in 1961, it's a lot different in the 60s than it was now in 2026. Von Trips went off on an angle at the Monza track and then crashed right towards the stands and killed 15 spectators with his car too. So Von Trips died alongside those 15 spectators. Massive safety overhauls for the tracks and all that. Of course, the F1 is Formula One is like multinational. That well, very multi. It was actually shocking because in 1955, when they had that crash in Le Mans, that it didn't stop this tragedy from happening. So anyway, that's just terrible. Number 6 is Jim Clark, 1968. Jim Clark was a two-time champ from Scotland, and he was looking pretty good for himself. He was a great driver and giving Great Britain some help. Unfortunately, though, Clark would die in a Formula 2 race in Hockenheim. The problem, of course, is that, you could still be a Formula 1 driver, but driving Formula 2. Nowadays, Formula 2 is basically the minor leagues of Formula 1, if you will, and you can't compete in Formula 1 and 2 events at the same time. But yeah, Jim Clark took a risk at a Formula 2 race in Germany and died for it, which was pretty bad. His legacy is still intact. And I know a lot of British racing fans are going to probably say Graham Hill, but technically he doesn't count because Graham Hill died in a helicopter crash, not a race car crash. Number 5 is my boy from Canada, Gilles Villeneuve. Gilles Villeneuve in 1982 died in Belgium at the Belgian Grand Prix. The Canadian was good. He won some races. He won like what 7 races or something like that in his lifetime. He won the 1978 Canadian Grand Prix, which was the big one, because he won in his home track in Montreal. But the fact of the matter was that he was part of Ferrari, which was pretty impressive. You know how good Ferrari is in motor sports circles, and Gilles was there. But in 1982, Gilles tried to pass a slow car, which was his downfall, and all that. Some say that the trailing car, actually, that car that he was trying to avoid, was not forcing Gilles to pass by, and all that. But this was safety. But yeah, Gilles went over it, crashed at an angle, and if you see the crash, you actually see him actually be catapulted out of his car. Remember, it's an open wheel car. So he was catapulted and hit the fence. It was massive, a shock. Of course, Montreal having all this thing. And if memory serves me right, wasn't the Canadian Grand Prix after the Belgian Grand Prix in standard? But nevertheless, yeah, it was just shocking. I mean, an 11-year-old shock Villeneuve, no, 12-year-old shock Villeneuve having to take things in stride and all that. No, he was 11 and all that. It's weird how Shock ended up being a race car driver, even though that his father was one and he passed away and all that. Shock's mother actually wasn't too upset, saying that, she was like, well, my mom told me I could do anything I want at 18 years old, and he wants to be a race car driver, so why stand in his way? Number 4 is Jochen Recht. Jochen Recht was a decent driver from Austria. And in the 1970 season, he was looking pretty good. He looked like he was going to win the world championship. Unfortunately, though, during practice for the Italian Grand Prix, a couple of races before the end of the season at Monza, Rick killed himself. Like, he got in a crash. He lost his life during practice, which was humongous. But Jochen Rick, his points were such that even though he lost the last few races because he lost his life, he was still the world champion. It's the only posthumous world champion. It wasn't like given to him out of sympathy. He won it. He would have been a world champ anyhow. But I think the F1 racing thing was your best 7 races or something like that. So yeah, so your best amount of races, your best 7 scores out of what 10 races or something like that. But nevertheless, Ritt did his job, and he still was a world champ. Number 3 is Ronnie Peterson at the 1978 Italian Grand Prix. This was big because this was actually aired on Wide World of Sports with the great Jim McKay and Jackie Stewart doing the commentary. Jackie Stewart would, after 3 times being the F1 world champ, retire in 1973 and then lend his voice to auto races, including the Indy 500 for ABC. So ABC broadcast this the Italian Grand Prix with Gilles Villeneuve on the front row, and he didn't get past. And then there was a massive line of cars, and then a lot of people said Patrese, his inexperience ruined him because Ronnie Peterson slammed into the back of him and all that. He actually he sustained injuries, but he still was technically alive. But unfortunately, though, that night he died. And a lot of people basically shunned Patrese for his inexperience and all that. Ronnie Peterson was destined to be second in the 1978 points race as Mario Andretti shocked the world by winning the Formula One championship. But yeah, Ronnie Peterson's death was just humongous because he was a star in the Swedish side of things, and it was great. He was a good driver. Well, unfortunately, though, numbers 1 and 2 are on the same weekend. Number 2 is the Saturday crash of Roland Ratzenberger '94 San Marino Grand Prix at Imola. So San Marino got to host a Grand Prix, which was big and all that. So in 1994, there were a few races until San Marino and Roland Ratzenberger, the popular Austrian, the 30-year, I think he was 30 years old, but yeah, Ratzenberger managed to crash into a barrier and he was dead on arrival, if you will. He was trying to qualify. It had some urgent safety concerns. Of course, the safety concerns were that should we be racing, the next day? But almost every time a Formula One death had happened during qualifying, they still did the race. So you got to do the race. Of course, number 1 is Ayrton Senna. I think you knew that. So yeah, so Ayrton Senna raised a lot of concern about his stuff, and at Imola, and there were people saying, "Should we race? Should we not?" I don't know, but anyhow, Senna was popular. I mean, really popular. Like Japan worshipped the guy, and Senna and Prost, those 2 races in Japan at the Grand Prix in 1989, 1990 are just the stuff of legend. But yeah, Senna won the Brazilian Grand Prix in '93, and he looked pretty good. He was looking past the San Marino Grand Prix towards the Monaco Grand Prix because that's where he was the 3-time defending champ. Unfortunately, though, on what was it, lap 12 or something, he crashed. He went off the track and crashed into the wall at such a high speed of 140 kilometers per hour. So, that's just dangerous in any situation. Unfortunately, though, yeah, it had to be Senna, the legendary Ayrton Senna, who died, who made sure that safety happens and all that, and overhauled F1. Monaco wasn't the same after his death. That was the race after he died at San Marino. But a lot of people actually said that he was the victim of uh, a a piece of suspension hitting him in the head. Because a lot of people said that if the piece of suspension after he crashed had gone 6 inches higher or 6 inches lower, he walks back to the paddock. No big problem. But it just had to strike him in the base of the neck. I watched the Japanese thing when they talked about Senna's injuries and all that. It was subtitled. It said, yeah, at the base of the neck where the nerves are. And, you ruin those, that's death, instantaneous death. He was put on life support under Italian law, but he just couldn't make it. So it was just horrific to see Ayrton Senna, legend, die like that. And Brazil really mourning him, and the F1 world, and the racing world for that matter. I mean, they did NASCAR coverage after Senna died, and they couldn't keep it together. And IndyCar couldn't keep it together after learning about Senna's death. So that shows you how much of an impact Ayrton Senna had on the racing world and all that. So yeah, of course, with the whole piece of suspension, it's actually akin to 2015 when I believe it was Justin Wilson in 2015 that he had a piece of debris landed on him. He wasn't involved in the accident, in the accident as it happened. It was just that a piece of suspension or something off of one of the cars that crashed actually struck him in the helmet. So that was akin to that. But yes, Senna's death was just horrific. And none of these deaths should ever be celebrated in any shape or form. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond.